Con el auspicio de Plenitud, Ciudad de la Alegría, hogarplenitud.org, Serenidad Spa Terapéutico, Serenidad.es, Permasalud Glamping, permasalud.com.
¿Qué tal? Bienvenida, bienvenido a New Age. Hoy estaremos dedicando el programa a la vida y la música de David Lanz, quien a propósito nació en Seattle, Washington, en junio de 1950. Él es un pianista estadounidense del género New Age y es uno de los músicos de mayor éxito en este género. Su álbum más popular, Cristoforis Dream, entró en las listas de ventas de Estados Unidos en 1988, llegando al número 1 en la Billboard de New Age, donde permaneció 27 semanas, logrando además un disco de platino. Otros de sus discos es Natural States, junto con Paul Spear, que se situó en el número 125 en la lista general de ventas de la Billboard. David comenzó su carrera como instrumentista siendo adolescente en los años 60. A final de los años 70 era el director musical de una banda de Seattle conocida como The Sweep. Tras la separación del grupo, David comenzó a tocar piano solos en los clubes. En un club de Seattle se lanzó a interpretar sus propias composiciones y, según dice, fue el primer piano bar de New Age del mundo. Durante los años 80, David Lanz comenzó a evolucionar desde el rock hacia el jazz, comenzando a grabar una serie de álbumes donde mostró su especial sensibilidad para crear viñetas domésticas basadas en melodías folkies, jugando con los tempos. Él mismo señaló que su música buscaba crear una atmósfera similar a la lograda por Stephen Halpern, aunque más popular. Hoy está con nosotros desde Chipre, donde vive actualmente con su esposa Christine Amari, que también es cantante, y allá viven con sus hijos. Es un honor tener otro gran músico del New Age en nuestro programa. Regresaremos en breve con la entrevista y la música.
Síguenos en TikTok, Facebook e Instagram como Goipas R, Vimeo y YouTube como Radio Serenidad S. En WhatsApp 593-999-203-203, radioserenidad.com.
So, as I mentioned you earlier, I already introduced David with some information. He's with us from Cyprus, all the way, some very long ways from here. And I'm very glad that he's with us. And so, David, first I want to thank you for accepting this interview. And I'm going to place a lot of questions for you, and because people are willing to know more about who is David Lanz. So I will, going to start asking you, when did you fall in love with the piano?
Oh, my. Well, as the story goes, actually, I started asking questions about the piano my mom played when I was around 4.5 years old. So I started piano lessons before I was even 5, So, a few years ago.
A few years ago. Gosh, and how did you start your musical career? Where did you play? How did you decide you wanted to become a pianist?
Well, I had my very first professional job. I think I was about 14 or 15 years old. And I had a little band. Just my best friend across the street played the drums, and I played the piano. And another one of our friends from school played bass. So we started with a little trio called the Town Criers. My mom actually came up with the name. And then as time went on, that band kind of evolved into a bigger band. And then I quit that band and joined a bunch of older guys and started playing more kind of, this was during the late 60s. So the music was getting a little more experimental. And I just kind of progressed in a lot of different bands. And the whole time I was doing that, I was still writing. I was writing my own music. So most of the bands I was in would play a few of my songs. let's see, in 1970 or 71, I signed with a big record company in America called Mercury. And I had joined a band up in Canada doing, I guess you could say, a progressive rock band. And, from there, one of my other friends played, he was with Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention. And we were really good friends. So we started a few bands in Seattle, where that's my hometown at the time. And, we just kept knocking around. And finally, by the time I was, I guess, in my early to mid 30s, I'd kind of had enough of playing in nightclubs, and I'd already kind of started to investigate, meditation and things that were a little more conducive to, the style of music that I'm known as. And I kind of got myself into playing solo piano and a record company and a small record label in Milwaukee called Narada. I sent them my very first piano tape, and they really liked it, called Heart Sounds. And then the rest is history from there on. People can just, look at my discography, and there's lots of information on Wikipedia that talks about all that. So
yeah,
there's a long answer for you.
No, wonderful, because I was going to ask you how you got acquainted with Narada, but you already answered that they liked your piano solos and they asked you to do the songs for the Heart Sounds. But yeah. I was wondering, what musical genres or composers or artists did you listen to that influenced your musical career?
Well, it's a huge list. I mean, it started with, my first inspiration was my mom, who played boogie-woogie piano, which I loved as a kid. And then I grew up listening to, she played a lot of music in the house. She played, Frank Sinatra and Ray Charles and this kind of music. But in 1964, actually it was February 9th, 1964, on the Ed Sullivan Show, this band showed up called Beatles. Oh. And they changed everything for almost every musician that I know from that era. So that kind of started me on my my quest to write that style of music, pop, pop music. And I was doing a lot of singing back then too. So I was writing lyrics and writing music. And but I guess after I kind of got through what was called the British invasion, then then later, there was bands like Procol Harum, who actually I'm very well acquainted now with Matthew Fisher, the organ player of Procol Harum. If you want, I can tell you a little bit about what we're actually just finished recording something special that isn't released yet. And the Moody Blues and Procol Harum and these kind of groups were very interesting to me, partially because they were kind of involving some classical music and some classical instruments into their music. And so from the late 60s, then I really started to listen to a lot more classical music. I played a bit of that when I was a kid, but not so much, because I fired my piano teacher when I was about 10 or 11 and started playing boogie-woogie and started making that kind of stuff up. But then the classical music was really interesting to me. And of course, then I loved listening to all the jazz pianists, Bill Evans and Chick Corea, Herbie Hancock, McCoy Tyner. Some of these names are probably familiar to your listeners, but they were all the greats from that era. So I just was like a little sponge. I soaked up all the classical music, all the jazz. And then later I got into what was called like this band Weather Report. They were doing this kind of jazz fusion, and I love that. They were my favorite group from that era. So jazz fusion, and so I went through all of that, and some of the bands I was in actually started playing some of that music. But then what happened was in, I guess, the late 70s, I was doing some meditation and yoga, and I ran into a tape from a fellow named Stephen Halprin, who did a tape called The Spectrum Suite, which some people call the first New Age album. And I was very impressed with that in terms of, I liked the concept, but what I thought I could do better was, and this is what my first album did, I took kind of the idea where he would take a certain, like a key, and he would play. He wouldn't really play much. He would kind of what I would say kind of noodle around and make some real pretty sounds, but there was really no melody or structure to it. So I decided to do the same thing, only I decided to make a melody and try to make actual songs in using the same kind of the same kind of idea of creating something relaxing and beautiful. And I used to tell people, well, I wanted to write songs that my grandmother would like, or my mother would like, because they wanted to hear a melody. They just didn't want to hear someone kind of, playing some sounds that kind of were for spacing out, So I kind of took New Age music in a more, I decided to make it, well, I wasn't even calling it New Age, I just wanted to make it melodic. And I told people I was writing Zen pop back in the day. So anyway, there's another long answer for you. So.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, Stephen Harper, his anti-frantic music is very popular.
Anti-frantic, that's good. Yeah.
That's what he called his music. But so we're now going to listen some songs from your Heart Sounds album and your Nightfall album, and then we'll be back with more.
Plenitud, Ciudad de la Alegría, hogar sustituto para adultos mayores. Contáctanos al 099-753-8085.
Estás escuchando New Age, el programa de la nueva era.
So David, how did you discover your own particular sound?
I think, I always had a kind of I always loved simple melody. And during my 20s and early 30s, I was trying to play a lot of jazz, and I learned how to play really fast and play a lot of, funk music. I actually was even in a band that we did a lot of disco songs and funky songs. But really, when I was kind of by myself and just at the piano, I'd play these real simple kind of melodies, and I was kind of embarrassed about it. I went, well, this is too simple, it's too easy. But then I realized that the best way to succeed was to be unique. And the best way to be unique is to be yourself, because you are the only self. And I went, well, okay, so I need to just kind of follow my heart there. And so that's what I did. I just kind of followed my heart. And, all the music I guess I had listened to and played and experimented with, it had all kind of soaked in. So I guess, like most musicians, I just took the best of what it was and kind of came up with my own recipe. So
that's great. So in your collaborations with Paul Spear, you use synthesizers. So how was that experience for you, using synthesizers and, all kinds of instruments?
Yeah, well, what was kind of fun with Paul is we started with the two instruments that we were pretty known as, a piano and a guitar. And then at first, the synthesizer was just there to kind of maybe imitate, like some orchestral sounds or actually when the couple songs that we're most known for, I didn't play the piano at all. I played a synthesizer called the DX7. And I had heard that early on somewhere. I think it was at a music store. And I heard this sound. It was a Celtic harp. And I thought, wow, I love that sound. So when it came time we were doing Natural States, I had come up with this melody for a song called Behind the Waterfall. And I just had this feeling that it was going to sound really good if I used the DX7 and I used that particular, what they call a patch. It was a Celtic harp. And so we used that on a couple songs. The other one was Desert Rain, which is another popular piece that Paul and I did. So the most popular songs, actually, I didn't use the piano. I used the DX7. And at the time, it was, I had played synthesizer many years before that, but it wasn't as expressive. It was more of it was harder, to get, the technology was a little primitive in the, mid to late 70s. But by the time we got into the 80s, I think they called it FM techno. I wasn't sure. I'm not really that tech savvy, but the DX7 was a new breed, and it was more expressive, and it had touch response, meaning that you could hit a note hard or soft, and you would get a response that was dynamic, loud or soft, like a piano. So it was a little closer to my touch and feel, and so yeah. At first, I was very enamored with synthesizers.
So what happened? Because I wonder, you didn't have that much synthesizers later on. I mean, what was how do you compare the synthesizers with the piano for you?
Well, the thing about, like I said, the synthesizer, at first I was trying to I wanted the sound of more of an orchestral sound. So after I recorded after I did the album Cristoforis Dream, it was so successful that I was actually able to afford to hire a real orchestra to play the music. So I used the piano and then relied on the orchestra for those sounds. That's really what I wanted to do. I mean, I never really got over listening to Days of Future Past by the Moody Blues, because it was such a beautiful record, and they used, it was a rock band, but they had this, it wasn't a huge orchestra, but it had a beautiful, beautiful sound. So the synthesizer became a little more in the background. And then, the first two records I did for Narada were both solo piano. And the solo piano was actually became very popular, and I became known really more as a solo pianist. So I kind of just stuck with what was working.
Well, your Natural States album with Paul Spear is just so amazing. I mean, it was hard to choose what songs to play because the whole album is amazing. So I chose three songs: Miranova, Faces of the Forest, and Behind the Waterwall from Natural States, and from Desert Vision. I chose in this segment to put Desert Rain that you also have with Paul Spear.
Right.
So we're going to go and listen to that part now.
Permasalud Glamping Lodge te espera en la provincia de Imbabura, en Ecuador, para que te conectes con la naturaleza, recuperes energía y bienestar. Te ofrecemos domos full equipados y carpas de glamping con toda comodidad. Escoge entre paquetes básicos de estadía y paquetes completos que incluyen desayuno y acceso al área de nuestra piscina natural con baño turco e hidromasaje. ¿Necesitas un espacio de paz y tranquilidad? Entonces este es el lugar preciso. Visita nuestra web permasalud.com o envíanos un mensaje de WhatsApp al 0999-203-203.
Permítenos acompañarte con New Age.
So David, Cristoforis Dream was a very well-received and very popular album. It charted the top New Age albums in 1988. But people who don't have your album don't know who Bartolomeo Cristofori is. And what
Respira profundo y fluye con
did you want to transmit to the audience a message or something about it? Because there was something powerful in this album.
Well, to begin with, I'd been playing the piano most of my life, and I'd never had stopped to think, hey, who invented this instrument? It was just sitting in my living room or wherever, and I never thought of it. And then at one point, a friend of mine gave me a book called Passion for the Piano. And in the very beginning of the book, which was a lot of fun information about the piano and different piano players throughout the time, there was a picture of it looked like a harpsichord, but what it was called a pianoforte. It was the forerunner to the modern day piano. And it says, this book is dedicated to the memory and the work of Bartolomeo Cristofori, the inventor of the piano. And man, that hit me like bang. I just went, whoa, the inventor of the piano plus his name, Cristofori, it sounded like Christ Euphoria. And I went, wow, what a cool name. And almost immediately, the song title popped into my head, Cristofori's Dream. The dream being, he was an inventor, and his dream was to create something that was expressive and beautiful. Because at the time when he was alive, I think the harpsichord was the very most popular instrument. And the harpsichord is monodynamic. That is, like we were talking about, when you hit a note, no matter how hard you hit it, it's always going to sound the same. So what Cristofori did is he took a stringed instrument, and his invention created hammers that could be hit softly or loudly. Hence the name piano forte, loud, soft. So what it meant to me was, okay, here's an opportunity to thank this person that created what I would say is one of the most divinely inspired instruments. And, I just immediately sat down after I got the title, and I just sketched out a little bit of a song, and I put it away. And, about a year later, I got a call from my record label saying, "Hey, it's time to do a new record." I was under contract. And he said, "What do you got?" And I thought, "Oh, what do I got?" Oh, well, I think I've got a new album I'm working on called Cristofori's Dream. And they went, "Ooh, I like the sound of that." So I hung up the phone, and I had to go to work because I'd already kind of thrown down the idea. But that was it. And, for me, I think it's a really beautiful song. It turned out really, really lovely. And I felt like I was kind of guided to write it. And it had a lot of special meaning for me. And I think it's almost like I tapped into something historical. I tapped into this, the origins of this instrument that has created so much music. I mean, let's think of it. The piano, you hear it in rock and roll. You hear it in country and western. You hear it in classical music. You hear it in jazz. You hear it in reggae. You hear it in gospel music. I mean, what genre can you think of other than maybe thrash metal or something, where you don't hear the piano? It fits into all these things. And most composers, they use the piano as a tool to compose all this amazing music that has been created over the centuries. So really, like I said, I felt like I was tapping into something historical, and that energy kind of lifted the song up, and took me with it. So, God bless Cristofori.
Yes, definitely. But how do you feel including other instruments to accompany the piano makes the compositions richer and attractive to a wider audience? Do you think that including more instruments can
That's a good question. I mean, sometimes it does. Sometimes, a song will really open up, it'll be lifted up with the right arrangement. But then again, sometimes if it's a delicate song, you could pick one of my more delicate kind of solo piano tracks. If you put anything with it, it might weight it down. So it depends on the song and the way the song is played. So it goes both ways, to answer your question,
Great. Well, let's listen to some tunes from Cristofori's Dream.
Okay.
Síguenos en TikTok, Facebook e Instagram como Ngoypas R, Vimeo y YouTube como Radio Serenidad EC. En WhatsApp 593-999-203-203, radioserenidad.com.
Abre las puertas de tu mundo interior y permanece con New Age.
David, do you feel equally comfortable playing piano solos as when you play with an orchestra or other musicians?
Sometimes it's a lot of fun to play with other musicians. The other night, in fact, I kind of ran across a video of mine on YouTube. For a short period of time, I had a band called the Good Life All-Stars, and we were playing. I had one album I did on Decca called The Good Life, and it was definitely a very funky, smooth jazz kind of album, and it was really fun to play that music. It really, in fact, it wouldn't have been that much fun to play that music by myself. But a lot of the other music I've written, I'm much more comfortable by myself with the piano, because it's more of an intimate, some of the music is very intimate. The Good Life, not so intimate, just more of like a party music, fun music, take the top down off your car and roll down the highway with the sunshine, that's kind of that kind of music. But for the most part, I think most of the music I've played over the years, the majority of it, I think I really enjoy playing solo.
And how does it feel when you hear your compositions, your craft with an orchestra, like in Skyline Fire Dance? I mean, you're there playing your piano, your pieces, and there's this whole orchestra. How does it feel to listen to it with orchestra?
Well, when I made that album, first of all, it was really a thrill to be able to do that. That was a dream come true. Paul Spear and I sat in Seattle and we had the music. I decided, because I was actually a little bit nervous we went to Germany to record this album, because that's where the best orchestra was for us at the moment anyway. And I was a little bit nervous about actually recording the songs just with the orchestra and myself, because I had never done that. So we were able to, we recorded all the piano first, and we use what they call as a click track. It's like a metronome that keeps everybody in time, because the time goes up and down because the music needs to breathe, And Don Davis, who we met as an arranger from Los Angeles, he did all the orchestral arrangements. I'd sit with him and we'd talk about, how we wanted the song to sound. And he was really well-versed in orchestration. So we went to Germany. We had 100 pounds of music in a suitcase. And I got to tell you, so sitting in the control room and hearing for the first time this, hear the piano, it was already recorded, so the pressure was off me. But to sit there and hear this 80-piece orchestra play this music, oh man, it was, goosebumps all around. I mean, it was quite the thrill. So yeah, I'll never forget that moment of first hearing the orchestra. And I kind of somewhat had that experience a couple years before that when I did Cristoforis' Dream. I had a 16-piece string section, which was the first time I had real strings, and that was gorgeous, But then the power of this 80-piece orchestra with not only strings, but the flutes and the brass and the timpani drums and just everything, it was bang zoom, it was big.
Yeah, and this is a very powerful album. I mean,
yes,
so many amazing songs with, you go up and down in the rhythms and the textures, and it's just an amazing album. And so I just remembered when I was talking about this, that I saw you live in your piano in somewhere in the Bay Area in California, in San Francisco, I think it was. Somewhere around there. In the night.
Was it the Palace?
Early 90s, I don't remember. But I think that's where I bought your piano book, piano songs book.
Uh-huh.
I got it there in that concert where I saw you. I remember as we were talking about this, it's just, we went through flash and I saw you, that image I have of you playing the piano, but it was just you in a huge piano. And so amazing. I remember that. And so, when I told you, I think just recently we played Vesuvius, it was sounding in the radio. It was like, so strong, so amazing. How do you go about naming your songs?
Well, every song kind of has its own little story. Vesuvius, excuse me, I was reading a kind of an esoteric book. There was a historical figure named the Comte de Saint-Germain, and he'd been thrown in prison, and he had all these things. He was a very kind of spiritual guy. In fact, they called him the Saint of America. And I was reading about he had some vision, and in his vision, he talked about this volcano, Vesuvius, erupting, and it was symbolic of something. But when I saw the name Vesuvius, I just had the feeling of, wow, that would be a really cool something to write a song about, So I had this big kind of piano glisten, I was trying to figure out, how do I make the piano sound like a volcano, So I kind of did an okay job there, but when the orchestra kicked in, now you're talking. Now we have something really, really big, So, so that song, like I said, every song kind of has a story, and that one was that's Vesuvius.
How about Dancing on the Berlin Wall? How was that? What was that about?
Well, that, and again, I was touring in Japan, and this was, I think, in the late '80s, and I was watching CNN, primarily because it was the only station that was in English I could get in Japan, and it was the weekend or the week that the Berlin Wall came down, and it was very amazing. I mean, I grew up, as a child of the 50s and 60s, and of course, the Berlin Wall, the Iron Curtain, that whole thing, it was always there. It seemed like it was a permanent part of our life. And here it is, it's coming down. And there were people actually jumping up across, and they were actually on top of the wall, and it looked like they were dancing, So that's where the title came from. I just thought, wow, I should write a song about this moment of freedom. So that's where that came from.
Amazing. So we're going to listen to some songs from Skyline Fire Dance. We have a couple, four or five, I don't know. It's an amazing segment with songs from this amazing album.
Plenitud, Ciudad de la Alegría, hogar sustituto para adultos mayores. Contáctanos al 099-753-8085.
Estás escuchando New Age, el programa de la nueva era.
David, how important has Paul Spear been in the co-creative process of the albums?
Well, right first, Paul and I met before either of us had started our kind of recording careers, and we became good friends, and we had a lot of kind of mutual musical interests. So for the first part of my career, Paul was very instrumental. He was a really great engineer, and really was able to kind of take the ideas that I had and merge them with his own ideas and create create the music that we created. So I have to really, Paul was really helpful, kind of to help me kind of get myself kind of off the ground and going. And then we both kind of decided to go our separate ways. And I had managers that said, well, you've done a lot of work with Paul, and it's always good for artists to try different things and to work with different people. So I did that. I went off and did a few other albums with different producers, and had some success going in that direction. So yeah, Paul was a great friend and a great partner for getting the music out. We still talk. We're still friends, and he's still putting out. He does music. He does an album every couple of years. So he's working on. In fact, I just played on. He had me play piano on one track of his that's coming out on an album. I don't know when it's coming out. I don't know the name of the album, but anyway, I'm sure you'll hear about it on Facebook and the other social media.
So you have collaborations like, I cannot spell his last names, Gary Strauss.
Gary Strauss. Yeah,
exactly.
He's he's a real crazy friend of mine. He tracked me down in Seattle. We both were living in Seattle, and he was playing Native American flute. And he had kind of come from a jazz background, but he decided he wanted to do something more. He had spent a lot of time with the indigenous people, some of the tribes, especially in the Midwest, and they taught him some of their traditional songs. And so Gary and I decided, we kind of started. I wanted to help him out a little bit, but we ended up, I think over almost a whole decade of doing not only the Native American music, but then he joined me when I did this. I did a couple of tribute records to the music of the Beatles, and so Gary was another good friend and good collaborator.
Do you find inspiration in nature, or maybe you go in meditation and sort of open up to any inspiration? How does inspiration come for you?
Well, I used to be more, I think, I lived in the Pacific Northwest, and it's a beautiful place. There's, rainforests and beautiful trees. And I spent almost every day, I would take a walk out in the woods. So I've spent a lot of time in nature. But I kind of have a rich inner life, So really when I compose, not always, but mostly, I just kind of follow the sound of the music. It's inside of me. And also now my wife, my partner, Christine Marie, we've been for the last decade, collaborating on music, and she's a great composer. So I'll start something or she'll start something, and we kind of dialogue back and forth. So there's a lot of inspiration there between us as co-creators. So, that's another part of the puzzle here.
Because of the kind of music you do, like your piano solos and the covers of your albums, the names, do you consider yourself like a romantic person, a sensitive person, or maybe both, or neither?
Yeah, no, I think I've always been a little more, on the romantic side. I'm definitely, I'm a Cancer, so I'm a water sign. So I'm supposed to be very emotional. And so I think my emotions run kind of deep. Like I said, I've always been attracted to that kind of emotional music. In fact, when I was a kid, I liked music that was kind of sad, or bittersweet. And in fact, a lot of people have said, well, why do you just play such sad music? And I go, well, to me, it's not sad. It's just that it comes from more of a deeper feeling, and I find that music very attractive. So I guess I am pretty much at least a musical romantic,
Oh, that's great. Well, let's listen to some music from Return to the Heart, Bridge of Dreams, Sacred Road, and Songs from an English Garden. We're going through almost all your albums.
Very good.
Okay, great.
Permasalud Glamping Lodge te espera en la provincia de Imbabura, en Ecuador, para que te conectes con la naturaleza, recuperes energía y bienestar. Te ofrecemos domos full equipados y carpas de glamping con toda comodidad. Escoge entre paquetes básicos de estadía y paquetes completos que incluyen desayuno y acceso al área de nuestra piscina natural con baño turco e hidromasaje. ¿Necesitas un espacio de paz y tranquilidad? Entonces, este es el lugar preciso. Visita nuestra web permasalud.com o envíanos un mensaje de WhatsApp al 0999-203-203.
Permítenos acompañarte con New Age.
David, up until the turn of the century, which album do you hold dearly in your memory and why?
Oh, geez. Up to the turn of the century. Well, my stock answer is I love all my children. So I think, first, Natural States was really great. It opened up a lot of doors. And it was, a fun time to be making music. Cristoforis' Dream holds a huge spot in my musical memory and in my regard, just because of how well received it was and it kind of how it created. It really opened me up to the entire world, really, as a composer and recording artist. And then the song we just talked about, Skyline Fire Dance, and that was another big moment for me. So and then in between, I did a lot of other. I did a Christmas album, Christmas Eve, that I really had fun doing. Sacred Road was a special record, but I think the ones I mentioned really had the most kind of emotional impact, and I don't know. It's hard for me sometimes to pick. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, but
anyway,
you mentioned really amazing albums, and
yeah.
What did you feel regarding East of the Moon, because it had a Grammy nomination? What
right.
does it? What do you think it has that it brought? It got a Grammy nomination.
Well, part of the reason was I was working with one of the most famous rock and roll producers in the world, Hugh Padgham, and many people may know his name, but they definitely know the Police, and they know Sting, and they know Genesis, and they know Phil Collins. These are all the people that Hugh worked with. So as it turned out, I was the first, as far as I know, the only instrumental artist he ever worked with. So we had an amazing group in the studio. I had Dominic Miller, who was Sting's guitarist. I had Wix Wiggins, who's Paul McCartney's synthesizer guy. I had Manu Katché on drums, who's well known for being Sting's drummer, and also Peter Gabriel's drummer. I had Pino Palladino on bass, who's played with everybody from The Who to Eric Clapton and on and on. And I just, I don't know, it was just a moment that we had a really great group of musicians. And I don't really know why. I always thought I would have gotten a Grammy nomination for Skyline Fire Dance, or one of those other records. But it took a while, but it was really lovely to be able to be nominated. I felt like, in a way, it was partially the music, but then partially it's kind of was a nod maybe to my overall, recording career.
Yeah, I don't know how Grammys work, but it was, it's cool to have a nomination there. And so I was wondering, like, you only did this, you mentioned already about The Good Life, the album, but it was the only jazz album that you incurred into. You didn't feel that connected to that style of music or that?
Well, I did. I mean, actually what happened was I signed I went from Narada to this label Decca, and I did East of the Moon, which kind of really had more of a kind of a new age thing to it. But then things were kind of shifting in what was becoming popular. And at the time, at least at radio, smooth jazz was becoming much more popular than what you would call new age music. So the record label actually kind of encouraged me. They said, well, the landscape has kind of changed, and are you willing to try something different? So I took it up as a challenge, and then it was a lot of fun to do. And then I left Decca, and then once I was left to my own devices, well, I couldn't, number one, to produce a record like that. That's what record labels are good for. They pay the bills, they'd hire the musicians in the studios, and then it was just easier. And I kind of felt like I wanted to go back to more of my roots, to my solo piano. So that's what I did. Yeah.
And how easy or how difficult, I don't know, how is it to fall on a rhythmic pattern while you're composing? I mean, do you need much time between songs to create something different from your previous composition and that they don't fall in the same rhythmic pattern?
Yeah. No, that's a good question, because I tend to rip myself off all the time. I'll write something, I go, I really like that. Where did I hear that? Oh, that was this song. Oh, okay. So I think it happens. I remember seeing an interview with Paul Simon once, I think, from Simon and Garfunkel, and he said, every songwriter has 3 songs, and really they just keep rewriting those 3 songs, And I like to think I've got at least 5 songs, but that makes sense. I mean, you get into patterns, and you kind of, so sometimes it's good to try to, that's why it's good to sometimes to change producers or change, musicians that you're working with. It kind of shakes things up and gets you to start thinking in different ways. And it's like David Bowie once said something, if you're really comfortable, you're doing something wrong. You need to be a little bit on the edge to kind of help, push you forward. So
yeah, that's true. Well, thank you for that. And now we're going to listen to some music from East of the Moon, The Good Life, A Cup of Moonlight, and Painting the Sun.
Síguenos en TikTok, Facebook e Instagram como GoyPazR, Vimeo y YouTube como Radio Serenidad EC, en WhatsApp 593-999-203-203, radioserenidad.com.
Respira profundo y fluye con New Age.
So, David, do you have a special mood that you have to be in order to compose?
Well, I don't think so. I guess it's just that I've been doing it for so long that I think what I do is I wait for the music to kind of change the mood. I'll sit down and I just kind of put my hands somewhere, and I just kind of maybe play a few shapes and just, and immediately my ear will I'll start almost like singing a little melody or something to myself. And that's really that's what kind of gets me in the mood. And then from then on, the music kind of takes me on a little trip. So.
Okay. And what aspect of the Beatles attracts you? And how easy was it to choose the songs for your albums that honor their music?
Yeah, that's a good question. There were just certain songs that I really liked, and they were all, if you look, I didn't really pick a lot of the big hits. I didn't do Hey Jude, I didn't do Let It Be, I didn't do Yesterday. They're all great songs, but I tended to pick songs I think that were maybe not as popular. And I don't know. It was kind of a slow process. A funny story about that was I was doing, I had picked when I was doing the first album, the Liverpool Reimagining the Beatles, I had picked all the songs. I needed one more. And so I was sitting in my bedroom at the time, or actually a little music room that I was listening to music, and I had all the CDs stacked up. And I went, okay, just for fun, what I'm going to do, I'm going to just I'm going to take a CD, I'm not even going to look, and I'm going to turn it over, and the first song that I see, that's the song I'm going to do. So I kind of reached my hand in the pile, I pulled it out, I turned it over. Excuse me. It was the Sgt. Pepper album, and the song was Lovely Rita. And I thought, not my favorite, but maybe, So I ended up doing a solo piano version of it. And my brother, who was co-producing at the time, I'm sorry, it wasn't his favorite, but by the time we got done, it was his favorite song on the record that we did. So.
Wow, that's great. I actually chose Penny Lane from Here Comes the Sun to put in the next segment because it's a wonderful arrangement. And so your album Norwegian Rain seems to be telling a story of a visit to Norway. I know your wife might be related to Norway. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So yes. Is this a story of a visit? Because of that, I thought of the name songs and the sequence. And why did it inspire you to create an album?
We made a trip to Norway to visit her parents, her family there. And while we were there was an old piano that used to belong to her grandfather that she really loved. And I was getting bored. Hanging out with the relatives is fun, and but after a while, I said, well, man, this piano is not so bad. So I sat and I started to compose songs on it. And it was a little bit, I think it was a little bit rainy there and a little bit kind of moody, which was nice. It reminded me of my home in Seattle a little bit. And actually, Christine helped me, I was writing the song and she was coming up with some ideas. And the title struck me. There was a song from the Beatles that I love called Norwegian Wood. And I thought, wow, Norwegian Rain. That kind of has a neat ring to it. So that's where the title came from. And then I think about half the songs or more on that album, I kind of sketched out while I was there visiting in Norway. So it definitely has a Norwegian inspiration there for the whole album.
It's a beautiful album. We're going to listen to some songs from Here Comes the Sun, Movement of the Heart, Silhouettes of Love, and Norwegian Rain.
Plenitud, Ciudad de la Alegría, hogar sustituto para adultos mayores. Contáctanos al 099-753-8085. Permasalud Glamping Lodge te espera en la provincia de Imbabura, en Ecuador, para que te conectes con la naturaleza, recuperes energía y bienestar. Te ofrecemos domos full equipados y carpas de glamping con toda comodidad. Escoge entre paquetes básicos de estadía y paquetes completos que incluyen desayuno y acceso al área de nuestra piscina natural con baño turco e hidromasaje. ¿Necesitas un espacio de paz y tranquilidad? Entonces este es el lugar preciso. Visita nuestra web permasalud.com o envíanos un mensaje de WhatsApp al 0999-203-203. Síguenos en TikTok, Facebook e Instagram como GoyPazR, Vimeo y YouTube como Radio Serenidad EC. En WhatsApp 593-999-203-203, radioserenidad.com.
Abre las puertas de tu mundo interior y permanece con New Age.
Okay, we are almost at the end of the interview. We're in our last part where we're going to ask you some questions about your latest album. So, what song story can you share with us about the album Water Sign? You are a water sign. Has to relate with your cancer.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I've lived next to water almost my whole life. I grew up next to lakes and rivers, and now we live in Cyprus, and we're up way up on a hill, and we view the Mediterranean Sea, and so yeah, that's that's where the title came from, and it's just really a collection of things that I had written over maybe like a year and a half, 2 years, and there really wasn't a definite overriding theme, other than when I came up with the title Water Sign. I went, okay. So I started to pick some titles that had to do with water. There's a song that's, and if I had the album in front of me, I can't remember all the titles. After writing 300 or 400 songs, you start to forget some of the titles. Yeah. But water was really kind of it became kind of the little glue that kind of worked its way into my titles. And yeah, that was a very, very fun album to make. I recorded it here in Cyprus in my living room. So this is kind of where we're using our home as our recording studio now, which many artists are doing nowadays. So yeah.
So I have a sort of like an intimate question, like what aspect of your inner being, of your inner self, do you think is being expressed through the piano?
Good question. It may depend on the particular song, but I think it expresses not only my emotional nature, but I think intellectually it touches on maybe my philosophy of life. It touches on maybe the relationships I have with other people, and I think it kind of culls inspiration, maybe like from almost the historical nature of my life, whatever has happened in my life. A lot of times, you don't really know, as an artist, you don't always know where things come from, but you can pretty much assume that you're like a reporter, and you're reporting on your life, and you're reporting on the things that have happened to you, consciously and subconsciously. So I think that's
So what took you to Cyprus? I mean, that's quite far.
Yeah. Well, as it turns out, Christine, my lovely wife, she was from Norway, like we talked about, and as a small, well, she wasn't small, she was like a teenager, and her parents took a holiday. It's a place that a lot of people go to on holiday from Europe, especially from the north of Europe, and people from Russia and Germany and in the UK. They've found that Cyprus is it's a lovely island, and so she came and she spent time here with her parents, and she just loved it. As it turns out, she hates snow. She hates the cold. So she came back a few times, off and on as a teenager, and she ended up working here, and she met a lot of she had a lot of good friends. So when we met, she was living in upstate New York, very cold, and we kept trying to figure out where would be a good place to relocate. Long story short, we ended up moving here to Cyprus. So
amazing.
Yeah.
How's life there? I mean, besides the great weather, is it a good life?
It's nice. It's very relaxed. It's very non-violent. There isn't much crime or anything that, like as we know in America and in other places in the world, can be pretty violent and pretty crazy, So, yeah. So it's nice and it's mellow. It's a little cold this May, but mostly it's very warm and nice, So.
Oh yeah, that's nice. So,
Hey, yeah. So Gloria, one more. My children are waiting. It's bedtime. I have two little girls.
One more.
They're waiting for
one more question.
One more. Okay, good.
And it's exactly about what can you share with us about your latest album, Valentine Hill?
Yes. Well, the title came off of a poem. I wrote a Valentine poem for Christine, and I always thought it was a neat. I kind of started looking at the poem, and I thought, oh, Valentine Hill is a neat image. So I used that image to kind of fashion a piece of music around it. And some of the other titles came out of kind of the idea of, of a relationship and Valentine's Day and such. It just, like I said, it was really this poem that kind of inspired the whole journey of, working through and creating the music for that album.
Amazing. So we're going to end the show today listening to a couple songs from Water Sign and Valentine Hill. And I want to really thank you for giving us this time. I'll send you the links for the video. And
Great.
Appreciate the time you've given us and the audience that is all over the world now. Thank you so much, David. And have a great one.
Thank you, Gloria. You take care. Okay,
Thank you.
we'll see
Bye-bye.
you. Okay, bye-bye.
Con el auspicio de Plenitud, Ciudad de la Alegría, hogarplenitud.org, Serenidad Spa Terapéutico, Serenidad.es, Permasalud Glamping, permasalud.com.